Hello and welcome back to INMR. In today's podcast, I'm going to be answering the question, are Aston Villa really top four contenders? We'll be focusing on yesterday's game against Man City, key players that make the team tick, their top four rivals, challenges they're going to face this season, and Emery's impact on the side before coming to a conclusion. So let's start off with the 1-0 win against City yesterday. Leon Bailey got the winner to put Villa into third position. They leapfrogged City with that win. Aston Villa totally dominated. They only allowed City to have 2 shots compared to their 22. And those 2 shots actually both came in the same phase of play. So there was only really one opportunity they had all game to get a goal, which is really good defensively from Villa. They also managed 36 touches inside Man City's penalty area, whereas City only managed 13. It's their first win against Man City in over 10 years and they did it in some fashion. This was Villa's 14th home win in a row, but how did they do it against such a top-level opposition? We're going to have a look at that in a bit more depth in a second, but to put it simply, it's because their attackers won and defenders won. They're a very disciplined side. They all understand Emery's system and they've bought into his ideas of high-risk, high-reward football. Another reason is Rodri's absence. Those of you that listened to the last podcast, you'll know that statistically he is their most important player. And once again, they fell short when he wasn't there. I saw something earlier and it was in City's last 20 games, they've won 16 that Rodri has played in and they've lost all 4 that he hasn't featured in. That highlights really clearly just how vital he is for them. This 1-0 win marked Unai Emery's 50th game in charge for Villa and it perfectly represented the work he's been doing at the club over the last year. Everybody calls him a genius, but what is he actually doing? If we start off with his defensive approach, when Villa lose the ball, immediately they all drop and get really tight. They typically sit in a 4-4-2 mid-block, and this compact shape is really difficult to break down and play through. Even Pep said, they're really difficult to break down. And you can see in this shape here, just how close everybody is. It's a really well-kept back line, and the back line is actually quite high up. They do typically play an offside trap in order to restrict space for the opposition. And as you can see, the gap between that back line and Ollie Watkins, that is such a tight amount of space, and that's just only allowing Man City to use that sort of quarter of the pitch. They did go on to have their 2 chances here, but throughout the rest of the game, it was this exact same structure and they just weren't able to break through it. In fact, this offside trap has been so successful this season, they've caught their opponents offside the most times this season across all of Europe's top 5 leagues. Unai Emery promotes high-risk, high-reward football, and we've seen this go really well in big wins such as their 6-1 victory against Brighton, but also when it doesn't go well, they can get beat quite heavily as well, as we saw in the opening game of the season when Newcastle beat them 5-1. So Villa squeeze the opposition, and then when they win the ball back, they transition really quickly, which brings us nicely on to Emery's attacking style. Emery's sides typically attack as a unit. They play out from the back to invite pressure, which creates space in more advanced areas. Watkins is really key to this system, as he's technically able to drop in and play short passes with the midfield, but also he's got the pace to run the channels and receive a long ball. You can see in this picture here where John McGinn is about to pick up the ball and Ollie Watkins is making that run down the channel for the long ball to be played over the top. However, Villa are also able to play through the pressure and then create counter-attacks as they drag opponents out of position. Another key thing to point out is that their wingers play quite centrally. It's either Diaby, but last night it was Leon Bailey. They don't play on the touchline, they come in quite centrally to provide support in the attack. So as you can see here, Leon Bailey is making that run more centrally as McGinn plays the ball over the top and ends up being the one receiving it in front of goal. Whereas if he was wider near the touchline, he would have received it in a more wide area and would have had to definitely play it into Watkins, which would have taken longer. Whereas Emery wants just a direct route to goal. So if those wingers come in centrally, as soon as they get the ball, the goal is right in front of them. There's no extra work to do, which means they get a lot more opportunities in front of goal and therefore get more goals. Emery also likes his fullbacks on the ball side to overlap to provide width and a numerical advantage. You can see that here where the ball's on the left-hand side, so Luca Digne pushes up, and then that fullback creates triangles with the inverted winger and the striker. So you can see here, Luca Digne is on the ball. These 2 players come in here and it forms a triangle, and then Digne has the option to either play it in to Watkins and make the overlapping run and then potentially get it back. What actually happened last night was Watkins played it out to Douglas Luiz, who had a shot. That one hit the post. But as you can see in this second image, Digne does play it and make that overlapping run. And the reason that Douglas Luiz wasn't picked up is because, as you can see here, there's 4 players. Digne's on the ball and then there's 3 options. So what one do you decide to pick up? And Aston Villa have had that a lot this season, where the opposition never really know what route they're going to take because there's so many options for them to choose from. And yeah, as I say, Douglas Luiz was really unlucky not to score. Ederson was definitely beaten, but the post was not. So if we now take a look at the strength of the squad and key players who make the team tick. In terms of squad strength, every position has got 2 strong options. The only iffy one is Ollie Watkins. His backup would be John Duran, who's a good striker, but he's still very young and a lot more inexperienced than Watkins, but he could still do a job there. Everywhere else on the pitch, we've seen that strength before. Ramsey and Buendia are currently out, but the team is still performing really well because they've got players in the same position that are just as capable. This is going to be really useful towards the end of the season. I see them going quite far in Europe as well, so having lots of players that are just as good as each other in the same position is going to make it really easy for them to continue to be successful in both the league and in the Conference League. Key players then, I'd say if we go for our top 3, it's got to be Ollie Watkins, Kamara and Douglas Luiz. We start off with Ollie Watkins. He's providing the goals. He scored so many this season, and not only just the goals he provides, but his footballing ability in terms of how all-round he is. If we go back to the pitch that we showed earlier, where McGinn picks up the ball, Watkins begins to make that run down the channel. So even though it didn't come to him, it went to Bailey in the end. He is making that run. He's making the Man City defence think, and plenty of times this season it has fallen to him and he's gone straight through and scored. But also, if they wanted to play it round a bit, he's also able to just drop in and pass it around too. He's a very complete striker because he can do it all. He can get it down in the air, bring it to feet and be tricky with it. In terms of how clinical he is in front of goal, it's one of the best in the league. Douglas Luiz and Boubacar Kamara sort of roll into one sort of thing just because of how much success Douglas Luiz is having and how responsible Kamara is for that. If we firstly look at Douglas Luiz, so under Emery he's playing as much more of a box-to-box midfielder, whereas previously he was holding and not going forward as much. We're seeing him play much higher in the last year. We can see here against Manchester City as Digne plays this cross in. On the penalty spot, that is Douglas Luiz. And you would have never seen this under Dean Smith or Steven Gerrard. Another example here, just before he hit the post, Digne's on the ball. Douglas Luiz right on the edge of the penalty area, receives it from Watkins, manages to get a shot off. Finally against Spurs the other day, you can see we've got the winger on the ball, Ollie Watkins making the run towards the penalty spot, and Luiz making that late surge into the area as well, which you would have never seen him do before. You'd see him hold off just in case something happened, but no, now he's looking to support the attack and get more numbers in the box. They've got a higher likelihood of scoring, and you've seen how many times this season they've thrashed teams because they've got so many players present in and around the goal. His attacking stats this season are at an all-time high. He's averaging way more passes further forward. If we have a look at the amount of chances he's created before Emery and now, you can see that he created 37 before, and last season he created 45 under Unai Emery. And already this season he's more than halfway to what he was last season. So he's only going to beat that number of 45 again because he's getting more and more used to being in that attacking role. As well, the amount of touches in the opposition box, this one is absolutely crazy. So in the 21-22 season, he only got 8 touches in an opponent's box all season. Last season, Emery came in October. He managed 20, which was a lot better than the season before under Smith and Gerrard. This season, only 15 games played, he has already got 24. But it's proven to be a really good move for him, and the fact that Emery's managed to see that is just credit to his ability as a manager. But the credit doesn't just go to Unai Emery, it also goes to Boubacar Kamara. Because as you can see in this picture here, back to the Spurs game, whilst Douglas Luiz is surging into the box, Kamara is waiting outside in case Villa do lose the ball to prevent a transition from happening. So his anchoring role in midfield allows Douglas Luiz to push up, leading to Villa having a lot more attacking options and therefore more goals. Douglas Luiz had 6 goals last season. This year he's already got 5. Kamara is reliable in possession and very calm on the ball. He helps escape the press in the attacking build-up, as we spoke about earlier. He's very good at working the ball into the final third. In fact, he makes 4.66 progressive passes per 90. And as you can see in this picture here, if we focus on Kamara, just on the outside of the box, it's actually Tielemans this time, the midfielder, making the run into the box. He sits on the edge, and if the ball comes out to either, I believe that's Robinson on the right and Decordova-Reid on the left, if it comes out to either of those, he just sweeps. He can go either side, win the ball back to prevent a counter, because Villa do commit a lot of men forward, so Kamara's role is really, really important in preventing the opposition from starting a counter-attack of their own. And because Kamara is so good at this, it just gives Douglas Luiz even more freedom to progress forward. If we look at this final picture here, this was against Brighton last season. Douglas Luiz is approaching to shoot. I do believe he actually scores from this. But look, just behind him, Kamara waiting in case anything were to happen. Brighton play very similar football to Aston Villa in the sense that they like to invite pressure, they create counter-attacks rather than wait for them. So Kamara being there is literally just to prevent that from happening, and as I said, he does it absolutely superbly. You can see two players to his left and right. If it comes out to one of them, Kamara just anchors over. Moving on to Aston Villa's consistency and recent form. So they were unbeaten in 6 games before losing to Nottingham Forest 2-0. Since then, they are on another unbeaten run, currently at 6 games. They can extend that to 7 with a win at Villa Park on Saturday. Every game they've lost this season, they've bounced back with a win, and often quite a hefty one too. They face Arsenal tomorrow at Villa Park, as I just mentioned. The Gunners are going to be really wary now after seeing how well Villa played against title rivals City. They played them off the pitch. Emery's side have also got a good run of games coming up until the end of the year. They've got Brentford, Sheffield United, Man United and Burnley. You'd expect them to get 8 or 9 points out of that minimum. Burnley and Sheffield United should be guaranteed wins. Brentford as well, I'd put them as favourites even though it's an away game. And Man United at the minute, you need at least a point from that. So between 8 and 10 points until the end of the year. Their current success in Europe has been a great confidence boost for them as well, which obviously just pushes the squad even further. If you know you're doing well, you want to continue to do so. Moving on to their comparison with top 4 rivals, I would say that the people they're fighting for that 4th spot for are Spurs, United and Newcastle. Arsenal, City and Liverpool are almost guaranteed those top 3 places, so every season at the minute it's just that fight for the final Champions League spot. Here's what the stats say about the 4 sides. So goals per match, Villa are second, only Man City have got more goals per game than them this season. Newcastle 4th, Spurs are 7th and United are 13th. Goals conceded per match, Newcastle top that at 3rd, then it's United 5th, Villa 6th. Spurs 7th, so that's fairly even. Big chances created, Newcastle are 3rd with 34, Villa are 5th with 32, Spurs are 6th and United are 11th. In my opinion, the smallest threat out of those 3 teams is United, and in my opinion the biggest threat is going to be Spurs. They've only got the league to focus on, so UCL football is a must. Newcastle on the other hand, they want to achieve that same feat, but I think Newcastle fans would be happy with any sort of European football, considering the schedule and the circumstances that the club are under at the minute with all the injuries. So for Spurs, it's an absolute must. You know, they can't not get at least Europa League, but really they need to be pushing for that Champions League spot. Villa recently beat them 2-1, so it's looking positive, and they are keeping up with the big teams at the minute, which is really impressive. However, it's not going to be easy. Despite them beating a lot of big teams already, there are still going to be challenges that they'll face. We said earlier about a lack of depth at striker, and if Ollie Watkins is out, I do not think that Duran is going to be able to meet his standard. In fact, I don't think anyone thinks he'd be able to do that. He's got a lot of potential, but right now, I just don't think there's any touching Ollie Watkins. He's one of the best strikers in the league. However, that's probably not too likely. Since joining, Ollie Watkins has only missed 5 Premier League games. Another obstacle is going to be the amount of fixtures they've got. They face 4 of the top 6 sides in the last 2 months of the season, which could make a final push for Champions League football fairly tricky. They potentially will be still in the Conference League. I expect them to go really far in Europe. So even when all the other teams' schedules relax, you know, you'd only predict City really to still be playing European football, potentially Liverpool in the Europa League. But apart from that, clubs like Brighton, Arsenal, Newcastle, Manchester United probably won't be in those final stages of the competition and therefore are going to have a more relaxed schedule. Whereas Villa are potentially going to be playing 3 games a week all year long. So to answer the question simply, are Villa top 4 contenders? Yeah, of course they are. They're a really difficult side to break down when they defend. Their transitions are super effective. And because they attack as a unit, you never know what they're going to do next in front of goal. I think it's going to take a while for teams to suss out this side and their approach. So for that reason, I definitely see them securing that top 4 spot this season. That is where I'm going to end today's podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I will be back soon with another one.